We're here inside CNN Center. We're just in the last 10 minutes. Demonstrators have started to come up and down this thoroughfare of Marietta and break out windows of CNN Center. You just see something else happen there. Another demonstrator threw what appeared to be a large object. They're kicking it back out, guys. This is live happening in front of your eyes.
And some people are videotaping.
They just threw something on fire, Chris, a firecracker.
Yep. And the officers are obviously trying to clear the area in Atlanta as you watch it on your screen.
We're better than this as a city. We are better than this as a country. Go home.
And this message to Keisha Lance Bottoms. You do not win your election by a landslide. I think you won about 700 plus votes. If you don't arrest the officer by Monday, you will be voted out.
5 acres of city-owned land will become a new training facility for police and firefighters. Law enforcement saying it is necessary. It's a necessary upgrade.
And then, yeah, just make sure, like, when we start to move, I'll guide you. Hold up, there's this. Okay, whatever. How do I look? Am I in frame? And if anything, you get closer to me. Hold up. Fucking, let me make sure there's no cars or anything. Fuck up the noise. Okay. Behind me is the location of the new Atlanta Public Safety Police Department Training Center, colloquially branded as Cop City. Individuals from all over the country and outside of it have been residing in this forest for the last 2 years, engaging in an all-out civil war between residents and Atlanta police, who are using these grounds for a new lifelike training simulation. Police oftentimes conduct raids on this forest, and at this point in the construction process, things aren't looking very optimistic for the protesters, who have now been run out of the forest with all of these barricades set up specifically to keep anyone and everyone out. Police have made it very clear that they do not want anyone in the forest anymore, posting up these no trespassing signs all over different entranceways that have been utilized previously. At this point in the conflict, anyone trying to engage in the forest or enter it has been arrested and charged with anything from domestic terrorism to disturbing the peace or even pedestrian and roadway.
Who shot and killed a Cop City activist.
Cop City.
Cop City.
Cop City activist.
But what is Cop City and why is it so controversial? In May of 2019, the Atlanta Police Foundation made its first public mention of Cop City in the form of a YouTube video, where they demonstrated the conceptual grounds of the future police training facility. The facility would include everything from an amphitheater for events, to horse stables, to a shooting range, to an entire mock city, including a school and fake residential complexes, all to be built over a forest in the southeast of Atlanta. The very ambitious project was met with immediate and relentless opposition from many people in the city. Commonly expressed concerns were the environmental ramifications of the new project on the southeast of the city, as well as what protesters deemed the inevitable rise in police brutality as a consequence of the militarized training that police officers would be subjected to in the new facility. However, for the city, initial opposition to the project was of little concern, simply because the project was almost exclusively being financed by the Atlanta Police Foundation, a private institution which had no responsibility to answer to taxpayer concerns. And the foundation was adamant on seeing this thing through.
Atlanta Police Foundation.
The Atlanta Police Foundation is a nonprofit organization with a primary mission of driving crime down in the city of Atlanta to create a safer city.
The Atlanta Police Foundation is a nonprofit founded in 2003 with the goal of, quote, making Atlanta the safest city in the nation. It works closely with the mayor's office and the police department, serving as a means of organizational fundraising for them. But unlike the police department, the foundation does not answer to the people of Atlanta because it's a private institution. It simply has to respond to its board of corporate donors, who fund the foundation in exchange for some sort of influence. They tend to give their ideas for the future of Atlanta policing, which are then enacted through the APF and the APD. At the front of it all is the CEO and the president of the APF, Dave Wilkinson, serving since 2005, pictured here at Cobb City itself.
Dave Wilkinson was the only Secret Service agent in the room with President George W. Bush at a Florida elementary school when his chief of staff whispered in his ear that America was under attack.
You know, pretty much the whole world knew that we were under attack. Unfortunately, the only ones that didn't know was myself, the president, and the school kids.
He says it's moments like that your training kicks in and all you can think about is protecting the commander-in-chief.
We felt at the time we needed to get the president off the ground, up in the air, basically away from Florida, so that we could then assess the situation.
Wilkinson now oversees Atlanta's Police Foundation.
Wilkinson has had a long history of public and bureaucratic service. He spent 2 decades in the Secret Service and was the only Secret Serviceman in the room when Bush got the news of 9/11. A quick look at Wilkinson's past makes very clear what drives his intentions now, and he serves as kind of the X factor of the Atlanta Police Foundation, driving its most ambitious projects and being rewarded for it greatly, earning $500,000 in the last year of his IRS reported salary. He's very close with the mayor's office and very, very close with the police chief. Wilkinson definitely spearheads the APF's efforts, and in doing so, he kind of gets to steer the wheel of the Atlanta Police Department, determining which organizational direction they're going to go in. Wilkinson's ambitious initiatives have led to some of the most consequential policing projects in American history, including Operation Shield, which was a joint endeavor between the foundation and the department, which not only created more cameras in the Atlanta area, but allowed for the police to tap into private CCTV cameras.
At 6, soon Atlanta police will be able to monitor both city and private surveillance cameras. This afternoon, the Atlanta City Council unanimously approved this change.
Operation Shield first went into effect in the early 2010s, and at the time Wilkinson went on a full-blown local news media press tour in which he was celebrating the project. The department gained access to 16,000 cameras, and Atlanta became the most surveilled city in the US. Shield is just a drop in the bucket, and Wilkinson's legacy can be seen everywhere through the APF. From his addition of housing stipends for new police officers, to bonuses during the BLM protests, or even Crime is Toast, which is an annual award ceremony in which police officers are presented with varying accolades for their great police work. This is basically their Grammys. The Atlanta Police Foundation hosts it and has guest presenters, happens every year. Considering the great amount of leverage and power possessed by Wilkinson, the situation looked very bleak for protesters when it was revealed that the Atlanta Police Foundation was almost wholly funding Cobb City, especially when construction began in 2021. That was until the self-proclaimed forest dwellers came along. By the end of January 2022, protesters had said it seemed almost impossible to slow the pace of construction that Reeves & Young and their subcontractor Long Engineering were carrying out on the South River Forest grounds for Cobb City. As a result, many people from Georgia and all over the rest of the country actually turned to living inside of the forest as a means of protesting and slowing down the speed of construction. These protesters were intent on stopping the construction by any means necessary, and as a consequence, APD increased its presence in and around the forest, using intimidation and law enforcement to subvert any further movements.
We construct barricades to keep police out, police, construction, contracting companies. You hear gunshots all the time because there's a police firing range in this. Yeah, you can hear those shots right there.
They come Monday through Friday just to terrorize us like police do. Yeah.
Because we're trying to obstruct their project. Yeah, their
see.
construction only gotten like 2 days in the past year, and one of the primary construction firms dropped out.
The company the protester is referring to is Reeves & Young, which was forced to pull out of the construction of Cobb City because protesters bleached their service vehicles, doxed the addresses of their executives, and even vandalized a sister office in Alabama, which was caught on CCTV camera footage. APD sugarcoated the pullout of Reeves & Young, saying that their work had already been completed. However, protesters have called this narrative into question. Quickly, the protesters were awoken to the fact that this violence actually did work, and their weeks of action were paying off. They continued to orchestrate more. And APD, fearing the spread of more grassroots movements, started to crack down on any sort of demonstrations, both violent and non-violent, in order to completely subvert the movement.
Get out of the road! Hey, record this. Hey, him too. He was in the street. Whoa. He was recorded too. Guys, I didn't see any sign. I came in through the woods.
So what press are you?
I'm an independent producer, independent journalist.
Of what?
Depending on the rest of this interview,
this is a story that I think you probably want access to both sides. Will you be willing to delete the footage from today?
That's how we run the miles now.
You guys are the journalists. You're telling me to delete my footage? The footage from today, that's right. I can't delete footage. You can't delete footage? All right. Well, I think these officers here maybe what do you suggest?
Good, because like I said, that's
He sees the
we have to seize the cameras.
all right.
We have to see what he's got on there.
And for a while, this was the extent of the conflict, for almost a year. Protesters continued to inhabit the forest and carry out their demonstrations, while police continued their intimidation campaign and their crackdown on grassroots efforts, especially through raids on the forest. This was the standard until 2023, when the city finally for the first time saw how violent things would get. On January 18, 2023, APD and GBI conducted a multi-agency raid on the Atlanta forest. Body cam footage from one officer, the only available, shows the agencies ripping apart tents looking for weapons or people to clear out. About 18 minutes into the footage, we hear 4 shots, followed by countless more.
Oh, shit.
The agencies originally said that there was no body cam footage available at all. No footage was ever released from the body cams of officers involved in the shooting, so we have no way of verifying the origin of the shots. One protester, Manuel Tehran, was shot in the exchange of gunfire 57 times. Exit wounds indicate that Tehran's hands were above their head at the time of them being shot. Police claim Tehran shot first, as one officer was injured. GBI conducted an autopsy which indicated gunpowder residue being on Tehran. However, the DeKalb County Medical Examiner's Office did not find gunpowder residue on Tehran in their autopsy. The gunpowder residue, even if present, wouldn't pinpoint who shot first. Tehran, at 26 years of age, was the sole fatality, nicknamed Tortuguita, meaning little turtle in Spanish. Internal investigations conducted by the agencies found no wrongdoing on any part of any officer involved. No charges were brought forth against any officers involved, and the public backlash quickly fanned the flames of a riot.
Protests are happening in Atlanta after the death of an activist at the future site of a police training facility earlier this week.
You'll take a look. This Truist Bank right here, the front window blown out by protesters throwing rocks and bricks at it. And across the street, the Wells Fargo right there also suffering damage when those protesters went after that building as well. They also set a police cruiser on fire.
The January 21st protest started as a simple demonstration marked by the staples of speeches and marching down the streets, but quickly it erupted into violence, in the wake of which police brought a quick and indiscriminate end to the protests by cornering all the protesters and arresting anyone who was congregating with them. But not before the protesters managed to make an example out of one particular police cruiser.
Put him in fucking cuffs!
I didn't do anything!
I wanted to get a better sense of the protest, so I sat down with a bystander who detailed the whole thing from beginning to end for me. Jaffer, a student at Emory, documented the whole protest as it happened.
Let's start with, so what's your name?
My name's Jaffer, and yeah, I'm a student here at Emory.
You were at the scene of the rally?
Yeah, I didn't mean to be there, but I was just in downtown Atlanta for some other reason. And I heard that for Tortuguita, I think the activist who passed away, they're having a vigil or something like that at Underground Atlanta. I was just passing by, I stopped by, and everything popped up from there.
What exactly happened? Like, did it start peaceful and then it transgressed to something else? And do you think like the ultimate aim was always to raise it to that level?
So I think, it did start peaceful, speeches and a lot of different people there. But I do think the ultimate plan was to have what happened happen, because even while I was there, I was trying to film some of the speeches and was just kind of moving around, and there was like a group of people on the ring of the crowd still already wearing their masks, especially if you were filming. They were being really sketched, like looking behind your shoulder and what you were filming, and just making people a little bit uncomfortable. So I think they already had that in store, that after kind of the vigil they're gonna start moving, but I'm not sure. It was all impromptu for me.
Walk me through exactly like what had happened in sequence, like when you got there and like how it ended up.
Okay, yeah. So I got there, I just saw a big crowd at Underground Atlanta. I went down, and there was about probably 200 people kind of just gathered around, and a couple people giving speeches. And I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but I just stuck around. They gave a few speeches and then started doing some chants, and at the same time people started picking up the signs they had lined up and moving. So basically the whole thing happened just on Peachtree Street, Underground Atlanta, past the Ritz-Carlton, and then to like the intersection with AGM. So they started moving down, and I just kind of followed the crowd, and I tried to stay kind of a distance away. And then it started getting real when they started pulling masks off, balaclavas or whatever, and smashing some of the security cameras that were passing by. And then like further ahead where I couldn't see, like the very front of the crowd, I started hearing like bangs, like, and it turns out as I got closer that some of them had made these like makeshift firework cannons. So I think they're like cardboard tubes and launching fireworks through it. So I was behind all the action, so I was kind of seeing the aftermath of it. And when I passed by, I passed by the Ritz-Carlton after they passed through, and the windows were shattered, and shit was just getting crazy. You could hear signs up ahead. And once I got to like that intersection of Peachtree and Andrew Young, that's when I saw all the cops starting to swarm in and cut off all the roads, pretty much like shepherd people basically into the businesses. And then that's when that thing happened where a cop car pulled up. And the cops all rushed out the car, so they kind of just left it there. They left their windows open, which is that's the big mistake. And some guy with a mask on just got his little firework gun and shot it into the car. That shit instantly caught on fire.
The police, when they arrived at the scene, were they like telling people to stop filming, or like were they just telling you to go in? Because in your footage you see them kind of like approach you and like you lower your camera.
Yeah. They weren't saying explicitly stop filming, but they were being pretty strict about moving people away. Like even if I tried to. A couple times I tried to like walk back and forth and get closer to film that car, but they were just like blocking you and telling me.
Clearly this protest went exactly as planned, and this level of organization actually piqued my interest in seeing the protesters' stomping grounds, the South River Forest. In March of 2023, I decided to head into the forest. Protesters organized a festival inside of their occupied forest, hosting many local Atlanta artists in support of the Stop Cop City cause. An account named South River Festival was promoted by the Cop City Instagram page, with the event scheduled to take place on future Cop City construction grounds. No address was provided, being sent out only the day of, and specifics of the nature of the event beyond simple music festivities were not disclosed. On March 4th, I went into the forest, no expectations, to watch as it all unfolded. The following is my visual account of that day. On the evening of March 4th, dozens of cars were lined up on the streets outside of the forest, and many parked inside. I followed foot traffic and was immediately met by the damage from the leveling of a previous bike path by APD, with Forest Dwellers graffiti all over the loose concrete, messages directed at contractors and APD, but also some messages not directed at anyone, revolving around peace and the preservation of the forest. The forest was also riddled with sporadic tents and banners, not difficult at all to see the prevalence of people living there. Not sure where to go, I followed people into an open field, and it felt as though I was teleported into an entirely different reality. All of the following footage is entirely authentic, with the audio and video completely untampered. As I entered the field, the music of the Forest Dwellers hypnotically reverberated, immersing the concert goers entirely, and leaving myself with an uncanny feeling. By the time of my arrival, it was already clear that the concert was in session. The Forest Dwellers were putting on quite the show already, so I figured before it all got too busy, I'd go see the camps. People were living everywhere, but were particularly concentrated in little tent towns deep in the forest, surrounded by tent neighbors hanging all sorts of flags, people coming from all sorts of backgrounds. There even existed an infrastructure, with little communal water stations and food storages present everywhere, along campfires and little makeshift amphitheaters for socializing. After this quick look, I made my way back for the main concert just in time for the sunset. Before I knew it, it was nighttime, and there was a crowd outside of the hot dog stand waiting to be called to the stage for performances. A sign as the stage's backdrop aimed at APD set the tone for the concert. And it went pretty much exactly as one would expect it to. Until it got weird, when the music stopped and people started running in circles anticipating a mosh pit when the beat dropped, only to be stuck lingering in the sound of a Forest Dweller's reverberated voice.
This kind of music is about connecting to nature, feeling the trees, feeling the ground, feeling each other.
This continued for a while, with people dancing despite the absence of music, impatiently waiting for something to come from the stage, getting weirder every minute. And then, it all erupted. This all went on for hours, so I decided to go see more of the forest at night. I asked people for interviews, and everyone declined. So after a full day in the forest, I decided to head home and come back the next day for the second concert. I never got the chance.
Dozens of protesters were detained by police in Atlanta yesterday following an attack at the site of a new police training center. Hundreds of activists breached the site, setting construction vehicles on fire and throwing bricks and Molotov cocktails.
As we go to Atlanta, where prosecutors have charged another 23 forest offenders with domestic terrorism after their arrest late Sunday at a festival near the site of Cop City.
Antifa is living in tree houses in the woods where police were building their new training center in Georgia. They called themselves the Forest Defenders. They say they're protesting environmental racism, but really it's about getting rid of cops.
The second day of the festival started off pretty normal. Although it kicked off earlier in the afternoon, there were plenty of people present for the concert, dancing and singing, cooking food, enjoying the bouncy house and all the other activities set up by the forest dwellers. With hundreds of people in attendance, police were surveilling the area, but nothing seemed to be a point of concern. Until an APD helicopter caught on to some unusual human traffic. At about 6 p.m., police noticed dozens of forest dwellers moving from the site of the concert to a nearby construction zone, masked and armed. The protesters greatly outnumbered police.
This is the Cop City site. Construction vehicles are up in flames. It's like a trailer for the construction crew, about to be up in flames. Smoke bombs. Cops just seem to watch.
Actions such as this will not be tolerated. When you attack law enforcement officers, when you damage equipment, you are breaking the law. This was a very violent attack that occurred this evening. Very violent attack. This wasn't about a public safety training center. This was about anarchy, and this was about the attempt to destabilize.
And you mentioned 23 individuals are being charged with domestic terrorism. The chief mentioned that a lot of them are not from Georgia. We now know, according to Atlanta police, that only 2 of those are from Georgia.
Police responded both to the construction grounds and the festival site, indiscriminately arresting people and trapping protesters in the forest. 23 people were booked and charged with domestic terrorism by the end of the night, with protesters saying police purposefully detained out-of-state individuals for agenda-building reasons.
Sir, are those live rounds?
It was very Stormtrooper-esque. It's the only way I could say it.
We have children here.
Back up. Hey, you need to leave now.
The whole situation was an optical disaster for the Stop Cop City movement, and polling a couple weeks after found that a new majority of Atlantans supported the project. APD used the riot as an opportunity to crack down at all costs, hitting organizers with racketeering charges used previously for mafias, and even charging those who organized bail funds with money laundering, charges that have since been dropped. Construction laborers began fearing working on the grounds, and companies had already experienced hundreds of millions in equipment losses, an insider source tells me. And the delays set back the project tremendously, meaning the city had to turn to its citizens to finance the rest of the costs. Only one problem for the councilmen: if the city wanted to garner funding for the project from taxpayers, it first had to open the floor to them for comment.
Happening now, activists are facing off with city leaders over plans for a public safety training center. They're addressing city council after hundreds of protesters swarmed Atlanta City Hall.
As the Atlanta City Council opened its doors to public comment on the newly introduced measure of increased taxpayer funding for Cop City, protesters had already organized a filibuster to overwhelm the councilmen with public comments. Interested to see how it all play out, and what the citizenry had to say, I brought Jaffer, the witness from the first Tortuguita protest, and we made our way down to Atlanta City Hall. Despite it only being 2 p.m., the line was already stalled. and the protesters outside of council were getting impatient. Organizers from inside came outside of the hall to inform protesters that there were already dissenters speaking inside, and the noise was disrupted. Any attempt to control the crowd was unfruitful, and it seemed I had no hope of getting in, until police instructed me to put my phone away and I was let through. The room was quiet and the council seemed checked out, knowing countless hours were ahead. They wore fatigue on their face. The speeches were pretty standard and similar in nature, until one citizen, Jimmy Hill, took the stand.
Last month, Sung Kim was indicted in the 2019 shooting death of Jimmy Atkinson. Now, Kim's attorney is arguing that federal officers are immune from state charges and that he was operating as a federal officer as part of an FBI Atlanta task force. And the task force was trying to serve an armed robbery warrant at the time. There was a brief chase before officers found Atkinson hiding in a closet. Kim was not disciplined by APD and then retired 9 months after that shooting.
Jimmy Hill was making his way to the podium to give a speech on behalf of the memory of his son, Jimmy Atchison. Hill's son, Atchison, was fatally shot by APD officer Song Kim in 2019, 4 years prior to the council meeting. Hill had been attempting to get justice ever since. According to 11 Alive News, Atchison was found hiding in a closet at the end of a foot chase through a building. A federal task force and Atlanta police were attempting to serve a warrant for armed robbery, and upon finding Atchison, Kim shot him in the face. In October 2019, the Atchison family said they met with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to hear the results of their investigation into the incident. They said at the time they were told Atchison was given two conflicting commands by officers in the room: to come out with his hands up and not to move. They said he was following the command to come out when he was shot in the face. Kim was never disciplined by APD, instead retiring from the force roughly more than 9 months after the shooting. Atchison was unarmed, and a witness later came forward to dispute that any robbery had ever occurred. Other officers were cited for violations of department policy during the raid, the 11 Alive News report continues, for infractions such as a failure to obtain a search warrant for the apartment where Atchison was ultimately shot and killed, failure to file a required use of force report, failure to engage SWAT in conjunction with the operation, and an alleged intimidation of residents of the apartment complex to obtain consent to search their apartments. The case has since moved on to a federal court, in which Kim has pled not guilty, hoping to be granted immunity from state charges. Atchison was 21 at the age of his death. He left behind his father, mother, many siblings, and children. Jimmy Hill took the podium to once more tell Atchison's story, as he had been doing so to no avail for many years.
For this year of the youth, please deny all funding.
Next will be Jimmy Hill. Due to yielded time, you'll have up to 10 minutes.
Amen. God is good. God is good. All the time. All right. When I come here today, as I look around, sometimes I wonder, how do y'all take what we say serious? Or how serious do y'all really take it? So many times I've been coming here for the past 4.5 years on behalf of my son, Jimmy Atchison, who was unarmed and surrendered, yet shot and killed by former Atlanta police officer Song Kim on the assumption of a bogus armed robbery warrant in which a witness came forward and stated that there was no going on armed robbery. 4 years I've been coming here, and I wonder, have anybody heard me? 4 years I've seen so many proclamations and so many speeches. 4 years, my son children have been without their father. 4 years, his sisters and brothers have been without their brother. My son was murdered unnecessarily and unjustifiable. 4 years, I've been walking in the rain, sun, standing in front of this building, City Hall, the state capitol, the county commissioner building, the train stations, in the street, holding a Justice for Jimmy sign. And it ain't justice, I'm trying to get some type of accountability because I can never bring my son back. 4 years and not one of you has supported my family. 4 years, and in the process, the last 2 years, we lost my son's grandmother from a broken heart. 4 years, in the last 2 years, we lost his uncle, a very close knit family. And May 19th last year, we laid my son's mother sent to accident arrest. She died from a broken heart while in this fight for justice for my son. 4 years, and still no support from neither of you. Now I saw one of you at a press conference. And I'm not saying all police are bad, but there are some bad apples, they need to be held accountable. 4 years, and you refuse to hold them accountable. December of 22, December 16th of 22, last year, a Fulton County grand jury indicted, saw fit enough to indict this officer. Taxpaying citizens saw fit to indict this officer, son Kim, and charged him with felony murder, aggravated assault, and violation of oath. And yet still today, no support from not one of you. These are taxpaying citizens that saw the injustice that was done to my son, Jimmy Atchison. 4 years, and still you say nothing. 4 years, I walked with the families, about 24, 25 more other families in Georgia that had lost loved ones to police brutality. And still, you said nothing, you've done nothing. 4 years. 4 years, and you continue to do nothing. Well, you know, I really want to just thank the activists and the advocates. I thank everybody who stood with us. You know, when I think about the young man who was murdered in the forest, off of Boulder Crest, off of Key Road, a road I done went up plenty of times because I'm from Southeast, and I seen he was on his knees and no residue was on his hand. I think about my son, because my son was unarmed and surrendering and received 2 conflicting commands: come out with your hands up, freeze, don't move. And they were shot below the eye one time, blowing out his brain. And yet the officer said he feared for his life. If the officer feared for his life, my son was surrounded by 4 officers. Why didn't the other officers fear for his life? Why didn't the other officer shoot? 4 years, y'all know the truth, and still won't say nothing. Yet here we are, we want to just, and always shout and quote Martin Luther King. There are too many selfless and scared black people in leadership positions, afraid to stand up for truth and justice. What happened to integrity? What happened to dignity? What happened to character? What happened to godly principles? It's time for a change. And like I said, I stand in opposition with the family of the young man shot, because I think about my son, the way he was shot, unarmed and surrendered, and still murdered. So I'm out here with these families, and I thank everyone. But on May the 1st, a proclamation was given to the families of police brutality. And I thought it was going to be police brutality, but it ended up being, when I got here, I seen anti-gun violence. Call it what it is, police brutality is police brutality. Stop trying to sugarcoat it. It's police brutality, it's police killing. So I accepted this proclamation, and I had a problem with it, and I went home, and I couldn't sleep, and I tossed and turned, and I tossed and turned, and I tossed and turned. And I thought about Martin Luther King, what he said. There comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but it must take it because his conscience tells him it is right. Today, my conscience tells me it is right to return this proclamation that was presented to my family and my son, Jim Atchison, to Keisha Wake and City Council. So I'm handing you the proclamation back. I refuse to accept this.
That day, the council heard 12 more hours of anti-Cop City comments, and in the following weeks, countless more. Yet, the verdict in June would come as a great surprise to protesters.
And
tonight, we know construction is set to pick up pace later this summer.
It comes after a city council vote approving funding for the project, and that vote disappointing hundreds who waited for hours to try and convince council to vote against that money. Joe Ripley joining us now. He's been following all of the developments.
We're not done.
After 16 hours of talking and waiting,
this is not a losing battle. We will never give up. Ever. They might have won the battle, but this war will never be over.
After 16 hours of listening,
the vote is 11 yeas, 4 nays.
An 11-4 city council vote to fund the controversial City of Atlanta Public Safety Training Center, and yet a pledge to keep fighting its construction.
Hell no. No, not at all. It can't happen. It won't happen.
The vote approves $31 million as part of the city's budget surplus to fund the center's construction, set to pick up later this summer. The vote also allows for a leaseback agreement that will result in the city making an additional $36 million payment over 30 years to rent training facilities on site in southeast DeKalb County.
So protesters turned to more traditional means, figuring at a certain point the city had to stop ignoring their concerns. They aimed to get the issue on the ballot for a referendum. This marked the beginning of the most confusing saga in the police-protester conflict. Georgia law technically allows for citizens to force referendums to put ordinances onto ballots. However, it is a pretty unknown provision and had never happened in the state until 2023, when residents of a small county in Georgia's southeast coast forced a referendum to halt the construction of a spaceport.
Major setback for the proposed spaceport Camden after the Georgia Supreme Court upheld election results from last year in which voters overwhelmingly rejected the project.
With a lack of clear precedents, the referendum process was fairly ambiguous. Upon the announcement of the plan by the protesters, the city said the clerk would have to approve the provision and the protesters would have to gather signatures from 70,000 Atlanta residents that voted in the previous cycle.
From protest,
but here we go,
to petition, Mary Hooks puts pen to paper, becoming the first person to sign a petition to try and put the construction of a new public safety training center for the city of Atlanta to a vote on the November ballot. One down, more than 70,000 signatures to go. Any Atlanta resident who voted in the last local election in 2021 is eligible to sign the petition and must provide a physical signature. Atlanta City Council member Liliana Bakhtiari signed next.
By September, the protesters had collected over 100,000 signatures, but the city's clerk office refused to begin a signature verification process, citing an ongoing legal battle over the validity of the referendum initiative.
Yeah, so the city argued that because the matter is in court, the counting process must wait.
The people who oppose what they call Cop City say the city of Atlanta pulled a fast one on them by allowing them to submit boxes full of petitions, but then saying that the boxes would sit here in City Hall unopened.
So what could have been the city's justification for not verifying the signatures of the protesters? The proceedings were stuck in legal limbo, and eventually the court case made it all the way to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. According to Georgia Public Broadcasting, state law said the collection period must have ran for 60 days, and those who witnessed the petition signing must have been registered city voters. 4 DeKalb County residents who live near the site, situated just outside of Atlanta city limits, filed a lawsuit arguing the residency requirement to collect petitions violated their rights, as the safety training center would still affect them. A federal judge agreed, writing that requiring collectors to be Atlanta voters imposed a severe burden on core political speech and restarted the 60-day clock to collect signers. The city appealed that decision, arguing that the overall petition process was invalid and could not force a vote to cancel a contract, and that the judge's decision was overbroad. In the meantime, the city refused to begin the petition validation process, citing the pending court case, and refused to answer questions about how it would handle certain questions that arose with the verification of petition entries. And then the city did something shocking.
The latest snag centers on how the city posted thousands of petition signatures online.
They say the city clerk recklessly posted unredacted and unsecured data online when they posted the signatures. Names, addresses, and phone numbers could clearly be seen on the petition.
I had asked that as they were posted, there were steps taken so they were not easily downloadable. They were not easily scraped, as they say. This is a way that identity thieves use programs to sort of gather up lots of information.
Petition organizers are now requesting the city clerk to take down the unredacted info, recuse themselves from any matters related to the referendum, and hire outside legal counsel.
In the midst of its refusal to count signatures, the city of Atlanta managed to release the personal information of all the signees, including but not limited to their addresses, their names, and their phone numbers. And simultaneously, they continued to not outline how signatures would be counted. And so once again, protesters made their way down to the forest and clashed with police. And once again to no avail, as construction continued and the city did not back down from its refusal to verify the signatures. And then, in February, the fatal blow was dealt.
We're actually calling in this room real democracy, led for by the people. We have just witnessed in the council on committee that this city refuses to engage with issues that are important to its constituents and the people who live here.
In February, the city finally introduced its rules for signature counting, and in the process, added a stipulation for signature matching, a highly controversial measure. Signature matching requires that each signee is cross-referenced in some sort of database to make sure that their signature matches a previous signature of theirs in a previous legally binding document, whether that be voter registration or some sort of driver's license paperwork. A common criticism of signature matching, specifically one derived from the ACLU, is that it leads to voter disenfranchisement because oftentimes a voter's signature does not match previous rolls of their signature. This would happen in cases such as divorcees, where perhaps their last name isn't the one that they had previously, or those in opposite instances who just got married. Or in the case of the protesters who were largely collecting signatures on clipboards, signatures could be shaky and unstable. And signature matching would allow the city council to strike down any of these shaky or unstable signatures by virtue of them not matching up perfectly with a previous signature on voter registration or driver's license information. This put over 20% of the signatures at risk and made it so that the referendum would be more likely to fail than not. Protests at city council erupted, but the referendum did not make it on the ballot in March for the primaries or in November for the general election. Since then, the Vote to Stop Cop City Twitter account has gone radio silent, and the referendum has been largely abandoned.
Enough is enough! Enough is enough! Enough is enough! Enough is enough!
With all other options exhausted and construction continuing, protesters turned to traditional and more reliable means of opposition that had worked for them previously.
2 people were arrested after an hours-long protest this morning at a construction site in Midtown. Officials say they attached themselves to construction equipment in protest of the future Atlanta Public Safety Training Center.
And now, 4 years into the conflict, as construction rages on and the future looks bleak for the protesters, there seems to still be no end in sight. In my most recent visit to the construction site, I found that protesters have been ran out entirely. Mattresses thrown over the barricade, trespassing signs worn out with no need to reinforce them anymore. But despite the hurrying progression in the construction process, the protesters maintain a certain optimism. Sporadic violence continues, sporadic protests continue, and there remains a hope in the police that this is all resolved, but in the protesters, that this is far from over.
If not